There are groups and foundations which meet in secret,
Mm-hmm.
which influence world events.
Yeah. What about the Bohemian Grove? Anything on that?
I don't have any insight on that. I have not researched that subject. No.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, I don't expect you to know everything. I'll just run through a list of topics, and as they come through on the live chat and the questions that come in our Fast Blast, I'll just relay them over there to you. Mike, when you talk about Satan's government, now, is that just sort of a theory cover title for a lot of inappropriate activities by a government, or is Satan's seat literal, figuratively, Satan's seat?
Well, you know, I guess the way I would answer that is the Bible, scriptures in the Bible very clearly state that Satan is the god of this world. There are numerous scriptures, and I cite them in detail in the book Satan's Government. There are numerous scriptures, and I'm sure your listeners can go to their online concordances and look those scriptures up, which make it clear in the New Testament that Satan is the god of this world, and what that means is that for this particular period of time, God has allowed Satan to be in charge of this world. You know, the account in Genesis where it was said, 6 days shall you labor. Many Bible students and theologians believe that if you extend that concept, what that meant was that humanity would live for 6,000 years under a satanic system, and Christians and believers would be prosecuted, and only at the end of that time would we be free, and would we experience the millennial rule of Jesus Christ, which again is foretold in the book of Revelation. So yes, I do believe that Satan is the god of this world. I believe what the scriptures say, but of course I'm not in a position to go into any detail on that. I'm only going on what I've studied in the Bible and what conclusions I've come to.
Well, let me ask you something, Mike. Do you go about your search for information and sort of insist that it line up with a biblical worldview, and if it doesn't, do you discard it?
No, I don't discard anything. I think an intelligent person will try to obtain relevant information from every source that becomes available. And I think you know, Christians in particular, when they're trying to come to grips with the situation they find themselves in, should realize, and I think Christians do realize in this world, that you have to study beyond the Bible. You certainly should study the Bible and live by it, but you should certainly look to many other areas to gain information. And of course, the news is an excellent source of information. The internet is a fantastic source of information.
Yeah. Speaking of that, do you feel at any time this Satan government will clamp down on the free-willing exercise of free speech on the internet?
That's a very relevant and excellent question. And the short answer to that is they don't need to. They don't need to, because the system we live under has accomplished to a great extent beating the will of humanity down to a level of apathy, at which point it's not necessary to forcefully to enforce in the so-called developed nations, the wealthy nations, U.S. and Canada and European nations. It's not necessary to do that. 99% of people, maybe not 99%, 90% of people are generally have become so apathetic and resigned to what's going on that regardless of what they hear, will not take any real action. And so I don't believe the system feels it's necessary to physically clamp down and limit discussions on the internet.
Let me ask you this: you talk about apathy. There have been some recent revelations and study release saying that municipal water supplies are becoming contaminated with mood-altering drugs that vast amounts of society are on and taking and going into the system, and then somehow being well, I guess filtered in the system and then put back into the drinking water where people are drinking these drugs. In fact, here in Indianapolis, we had a political cartoon that showed someone getting a glass of water, and then somebody else asked, do you have a prescription for that? So is it possible that in the water, people are being drugged into apathy?
Well, that's been going on for decades. Fluoride, which has been added to our water supply for decades now, is a neurotoxin, which governments found decades ago when they were researching why some cities and parts of the world, why the people were so docile in some parts of the world, and why other people in other parts of the world were so easily stirred up to rebellion against the government. And what they found was that there really was a common element in those areas where people were generally more docile, and that was naturally occurring fluoride. So in the decades since, the system, particularly governments, have enforced the addition of fluoride into the public water supply because it is well known that the neurotoxin fluoride generally breaks down the will of people to fight or to be aggressive or to assert themselves. So that's been going on for a long time. As to whether they are now upping the dosage with more serious mood-altering drugs, it's most probable. It's most probable. But I would like to suggest that chemical drugs aren't necessary. The most powerful drug is the media, which I call the image of the beast. The media is the most powerful narcotic, and we as a society are addicted to it, and we are consuming it in vast doses. So the government doesn't really need to add any kind of chemical drugs into our water supply to hypnotize us. It's already been accomplished through the media.
Cite me an example of hypnotism through the media.
An example of hypnotism through the media would be, well, 9/11, when essentially after the World Trade Center, the two buildings came down, and I'm sure many of your listeners have watched some of the 9/11 mystery videos and have come to conclusions about what really happened there. But I mean, it's clear after that how the U.S. government used those events to foment opinion for going to war. So that's hypnotism. That's an example of hypnotism. I mean, here you had this horrible act of terrorism which was committed. The only question, of course, is who the terrorists were that were behind it. And then, of course, that event was used to hypnotize vast numbers of people into the belief that there was a reason to go to war in the Middle East. And of course, anybody who studies military strategy and has a good understanding of the military situation right now already knows the only reason the U.S. wanted to get into Iraq was because of Iran. Because Iran, being about the 5th largest military force on the face of the earth, is one of the hugest threats to the U.S., and the only way to position themselves against that threat was to build up forces in Iraq, and that was the real reason why the U.S. wanted to go into Iraq.
All right, everyone, if you're just tuning in, we are talking to Mike Lucas, and we're talking about Satan's government. And Mike, it's easy to say the United States has Satan's government. Would you say that's title may be applicable to other governments worldwide?
Absolutely, absolutely, including the government that I live under, which is the Canadian government. Yes, I believe that the entire world, certainly, as I said earlier in the program, Satan is the god of this world. So it's not just one country. This system has spread its power throughout the world, and the way it works is essentially through banks and large corporations and governments. So it's not only individual governments. It's one system that's tied together by a banking system and a corporate system, and I call this the triumvirate of power. There's three heads to it. It's governments, banks, and large corporations, and they're basically working together to enforce their new world